What happens when a major tax abatement expires? My name is Jan Dijkers. I'm a real estate broker and agent in the city of Detroit and Metro Detroit, and a 20-year veteran in the real estate industry. And I have a special obsession with property taxes. Property tax abatements, called the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, will go over the different kinds of abatements and what happens when they expire. So there are three different kind of NEZ abatements. The NEZ, or Neighborhood Enterprise Zone New Construction Abatement, the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone Rehab Abatement, and the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone Homestead Abatement. They all function a little bit differently, and who can qualify is a little different, so I'm going to go over each of them separately. The NEZ Rehab is the most special and my favorite residential tax abatement because the taxes stay frozen for 15 years, no matter what the current value of the property is for that time, and anybody can be qualified for it. So you can live in the property as your primary residence, you can have it as a second home, or you can have it as an investment, and you can still enjoy this tax abatement. The buildings that qualify for this abatement were buildings that were converted from something to something else by a developer, almost always to condos, but from apartment buildings to condos, from warehouses to condos, something to that effect. It's a rehab of an existing building, and it creates more of a tax base by creating more properties to sell. Just like with the NEZ New Construction Abatement, by lowering the taxes of the buyer, whoever is developing this property, who is converting it from something to condominiums, it makes it easier to sell and faster to sell because it's more attractive to the buyer. The buyers can usually afford a lot more when the taxes are a lot lower. In order for the developer to offer this incentive, the property needs to be in a special neighborhood enterprise zone rehab district. Now, fun fact, the NEZ Rehab and the NEZ New Construction districts are the same. It's the same map. The NEZ Homestead district, different map. So in order to create one of these districts, you have to go through a process with the city council and the developer to show why it would be a benefit to the community, or you can take a building that's already in a district that was created in the past and then start applying for approval to use the NEZ process there. Just like the two other NEZs, once you have an NEZ abatement applied, the property is split into two tax parcels. One is the land, and that's a normal tax bill. And the other parcel, the NEZ Rehab parcel, that's the magic parcel. It is frozen at an amount that it is determined by what the taxes would have been before the building was converted to condos, and it stays frozen for 15 years, even if the property's value has gone up. No matter how many times it has gone up, no matter how many times it has been sold, the taxable value stays frozen for 15 years. It can be traded, bought and sold. It will stay frozen. The tax bill will be exactly the same from year 1 to year 15. As I mentioned, it can be owned by an owner-occupant, somebody's second home, an investor, and they would all three still qualify for the abatement. Very different than the NEZ Homestead and the NEZ New Construction, where you need to be an owner-occupant and prove so accordingly. The millage rate for the NEZ Rehab is going to depend on if it is owner-occupied or not owner-occupied, but the discount, the abatement, the tax relief comes in a reduced taxable value, not the reduced millage rate like the other two abatements I just discussed. What happens when the NEZ Rehab abatement expires? Well, this is a very interesting question and sort of a controversial answer because the state tax law is actually silent on what happens when the NEZ Rehab abatement expires. And so it was handled one way for a while, which I will discuss. It is starting to be handled a different way now, and there are people that are fighting the way that it is handled, and I believe all of that is sort of getting disputed currently or soon with the Michigan Tax Tribunal in 2025. So I think it will remain to be seen how the city is going to handle this going forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about I'll give you a little bit of background. So in the 1990s, the state legislature changed the tax law. There was something called the Headley Amendment and Proposal A. And so basically that had determined that as long as you own the property at the year after you purchase it, whatever the taxable value was at that time, the taxable value and state equalized value, your taxable value could only go up 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. It's just how all the tax bills in the whole state of Michigan work. The NEZ Rehab, that taxable value is frozen. It does not go up 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. It stays frozen for 15 years. So how this had been handled by the city of Detroit in the past was if you were the owner the last year of the tax abatement, actually the year before, because when you buy it, your tax is uncapped the year after. So as long as you owned it the year before the abatement expired, you would go from frozen to only going up 5% a year or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. That is how all the expired NEZ Rehab abatements have been handled, and some of them expired. I think the earliest ones expired in 2018 because the first NEZs rehabs were offered in like 2003 or something like that. So that's how everybody's tax bills. If you continue to own your property, you would basically keep your abatement. It would just go up this fractional amount every year. Now, if you sold it after the 15 years, the new owner would then take on that, the taxable value would uncap to be whatever the market value was at that time, the state equalized value. But that's just how it's been handled. That's how we've seen it being handled since 2018. Well, something very interesting started happening this year in 2025. Owners at the beginning of the year started getting their assessment notices, which basically says this is how you are going to be taxed for the upcoming year. And people who had the NEZ Rehab abatement, even if it had expired the year prior or the year prior to that, were suddenly being told that their taxable value was going to uncap to wherever it would have been the year that they bought the property. So they weren't having to uncap all the way to the current year. They were basically, the city was saying, you have this abatement and now we're taking it away. So your taxes were going to behave like you had the abatement, and now they are going to behave like you didn't have the abatement. So kind of like, almost like they would be reversing it in some way. This has resulted in a significant jump in taxes for some people. As we mentioned, potentially, 75%, something like that, going up 20 times, huge amount. And this is very unexpected because nobody was expecting the city to all of a sudden start handling the tax bills this way. So this one is still up for debate. I think it has a fair argument that if the tax bill is silent, that existing Michigan tax law should apply. So the way that the city was previously handling it, I think is fair, but I don't think the city has the right to make this decision, to basically make a decision about how the tax law is going to be handled. That came from the state of Michigan, and that answer should be decided by the state of Michigan. So stay tuned. Once I have an update on how things are going to transpire, I will certainly create another video about this. Thank you so much for watching. If you get value out of these videos, leave me a comment, subscribe, tell your friends, and come back and watch some more of my videos. If you'd like to get in touch with me, all of my information is right here. Thank you so much.